Last week, me and Luke hosted 2 group coaching lessons, or 2 groups of drivers that were divided into B and lower rated and the A's and A pluses, which means that we had so many different things that we need to look for. But on the other hand, I have just about 500 coaching hours, and this pretty much gives me a good idea on what to look for. So with B rated drivers, there are always some certain areas that can be improved. It seems to me that we're always following a certain pattern. So previously, as I said, I got 500, I would say even maybe 500 or more hours at this point, and there are always some certain areas that are pretty much the same, and it was most likely that he's not using the full width of the track and the racing lines were not there. So Luke started this coaching lesson with a couple of his advices.
So yeah, very common mistake with both of you, to be honest with you, and I do say extremely common. There's only so many things that people can be doing wrong at a certain level, because if you've got a grasp on everything, then you're going to be at least A+. Track width, without getting specific about who was using the most track width on different corners, you guys were setting up for corners like this, which is way too narrow, and I used to be like this, so I completely understand. It does take a little bit of practice to get over. But it's just like if you drive in real life and you try to go through a tight gap, you need to know the width of your car. So there's a little bit of not being confident about the width of your car. You need to be into this corner. You need to have your wheels on this blue and white curb. And you guys were setting up for this corner here, which gives you the entry too tight, which means you can't rotate the car, which means you can't get on the throttle. And that follows through the whole track. So there was a common theme with that. I'm not going to talk about how to do sector 1 just now. I might let Digit do that. But that was a common theme through the whole track. The slower you are on the throttle here, the more that time loss is amplified by the time you get to the end of the straight. So if you're half a car length faster on the throttle here, you're going to be 2/10 by the time you get to the end of the straight. And this is a really, really, really common error. You've got to turn for this corner as soon as you enter the tunnel. So you've probably heard the concept of slow in, fast out. You guys are coming into this corner, turning in when you get to the end of the tunnel, which then brings you round here. You're sort of on the left. You're sort of where you would drive if you were on the road. The racing line, as soon as you get to the entry of the tunnel, start turning. And it's about patience and wait. You want to sacrifice the entry, get really tight up to this verge, trees, dirt, whatever. Get on the dirt. It actually doesn't upset the tires. And then you get on the throttle here. So you're not getting on the throttle over here. You're not getting on the throttle down here. And you're definitely not getting on the throttle any further. You've got to get on the throttle really early into this corner. Just wait a beat to go full throttle if you don't have the confidence, but it will come to you. So it's really, really sacrifice the entry into this corner. Keep it nice and tight. Get all up on this dirt. Totally transforms this corner. You carry so much more speed down into the straight. So if you look up at the track map and you see this is more or less a 180-degree corner, sacrifice the entry to maximize the exit. So a lot of people think that you create lap time by going in really, really deep by braking later. You don't create lap time by braking later.
Yeah, I would like to explain a couple of things, like elevation changes and also how much braking pressure are you applying in each turn. So it really depends. Are you going to brake at 100% or are you going to brake at, let's say, 20 or 15%? And it makes all of the difference. So Luke was discussing like all of the things that you should be looking on the track, and well, definitely using the most track here on this circuit is an absolute must. Because if you're not cutting these corners, if you're not, let's say, on the curb at the edge of the track right here, you will simply not have an angle for the exit. And that's what's missing with most of the people that I coach and with most of the people that I see on the track. So this, for example, is not the same as you're getting as far out on the curb as you possibly can. So you can also see where the car is heading right now. So the car is heading straight, so into the tunnel. And when you start braking and when you put the brakes down, so all of that force will come to the front wheels. And when, put all of that weight, all of that force, the car is going, 200 kilometers per hour here, you have like a 200 kilometers per hour that you need to stop to actually make the turn. So there is a lot of force onto those front tires. And it's simply, when you try to turn in, it simply won't turn in because there is too much force. So you're combining braking and turning. And a lot of people think, you know what, I'm just actually going to brake. No, I'm going to brake and then I'm going to turn more. That's, you know, car is going to turn if I turn more. But it's actually not going to happen. So this is GT. There are a couple of things that work. There are a couple of things that doesn't work. So in iRacing, ACC, and all of the other sims, you can really feel that the tires are really scrubbing the surface, and you can really feel that the car is shaking, because there is no possibility that the car is going to turn when you brake. So we can for example help ourselves with just if we change the entry angle. For example, like here, we use the full width of the track, and then I'm gonna start to slowly turn in. And why am I starting to turn in slowly? Because I want to distribute that force evenly. So I don't want to break in the straight line and do something like this. I really want to have kind of a gentle approach to this and really kind of spread out that force evenly through the corner. So I'm just going to go onto the curb. I'm going to start turning in, which will help the car to turn in better. And of course, it's going to, well, as I think Luke was explaining, so the car is going to go where you look. And if I'm looking in there, and if the car is positioned in that specific spot that you're looking, you're already halfway there. So on top of that, use the full width of the track, start to turn in a little bit sooner, and also apply the brakes. And now the car isn't going into the tunnel, isn't going wide. Now the car is going straight into that spot that you were thinking about. And you're already there. You're on the inside, and then you can start putting the power down. And he explained all of the references, so I'm not going to go in again. And you're just going to be cruising. So one of those interesting points that I really wanted to tell you, like most of you guys are like B and C rated. I think, well, most of you are. It's not exactly pushing it to the limit every single lap, every single corner. That's the biggest misconception. As Luke was previously discussing, braking late isn't necessarily going to mean that you're going to be getting more speed out of the turn. It's actually the opposite. So you want to have a good line. That's the first one. That's the priority in everything you do, like having a good line. So if you go wide here, and if you say, okay, you know what, I'm gonna get a wider line in here, well, that's probably not going to work. Because you were braking, for example, late, the car was going wide, and then all of a sudden it messed up your line. And even here, I see a lot of guys try to brake as late as possible, but sometimes it's actually better. I'm gonna do a lap just to show you. Sometimes it's better just to take it easy. Don't even brake that much. So just let the car coast, but do the right line. And when you do the right line, the car will eventually be quicker. I think you already know about the references, turning point, how you brake and all of the other stuff. But once again, we'll repeat it if someone is missing those things. So you can just go onto the track and start driving, and we'll be watching. In general, you guys are, let's say, A plus rated, and you probably know your way around the circuit. Like more or less, some more, some less, but never mind. So the most important part for me is usually trying to understand the circuit, like the limitations, where to brake, where not to brake, and all of those little things on the track. And I think this is the point of this whole course. So for example, this turn 1, I realized that you're actually losing a lot of time if you brake too much. And when I say brake too much, I mean braking more than 5 to 10% is usually what's costing you maybe a tenth and a half in the long run. The next major point that I noticed with a lot of you guys is actually downhill section. So these kind of flat sections are not that much of a struggle. So I know you can brake, you can accelerate, you can turn. That's not the point. But those elevation changes are really making a lot of difference. And especially, for example, this corner and the entry into the tunnel. So you probably can tell that I'm always going very early into this tunnel, and I'm starting to turn in very, very early in this corner. And that's exactly because I'm trying to carry as much as possible, or as much speed as possible on the way out of the corner. And to get the most speed out of the corner, I need to get as close as possible to the edge of the circuit. So not going wide, not trying to take a later apex or whatever I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to stick as close as possible to the edge. Actually, it's the left edge of the track. And you can only do this if you start turning in at this point. Like literally at the end of the tunnel. At the beginning of the tunnel. So if you started turning in anywhere around here, you're already missing out. And the most important part of all of this is that you will get to the marbles, and those marbles will eventually push you out. And when you start turning more and more and more, you will actually get onto the marbles, and then having a wider entry isn't really going to mean much. And also you could look at the camber of this track. So this is what makes a lot of difference with, let's say, higher rated drivers, because you can see like the inside of this corner, it will eventually push you to the inside even more. So if you go wide here, you will get onto the marbles and the track will push you out. But if you go early in, that corner will eventually push you even more in. So you will be able to carry more and more speed. And what's the next thing that I also wanted to mention in here is that how much you brake at the beginning and how much you coast and how much you accelerate. So the most important part is that do not stay on the brakes for too long. And this is what I noticed, and also with the elevation changes, I'm going to explain it. It's here that you just don't want to brake for a very, very long time. It's all about the entry. It's all about the speed that you carry on the entry. You probably can stick even close up to here. Like you can see, there is a bit of gravel, but that's not really going to make much of a difference. You will still have that grip. And then what happens when you start braking and turning at the same time at high speeds? Your front tires will eventually start to lose grip. And when those tires start to lose grip, you were most likely drifting wide. And not carrying that speed, you're just losing more and more speed, but the car simply hasn't got the grip to cope with all of that stress. So it's actually brake at the entry, coast in the middle, and exit just in the middle of this corner, just about here. So it's as soon as you can see those signs on the right. So for example, when you're going uphill, most of the braking pressure should be at the back tires or at the rear tires, because they have the most weight on them. So you're getting the most efficiency of braking if you just put the braking balance to the rear. But for example, if you're going downhill, it's the exact opposite. You're pushing a lot of that weight to the front wheels, and if you put a lot of that, let's say, braking balance, I see a lot of people do that. You might actually lose control if you do so. So if you hit the brakes and start turning in at this point, the back will rotate, and it will rotate too much, and then you will actually have entry oversteer, and the car will lose that, I would say, that ability to start accelerating sooner. So you will start accelerating later, which in the end is going to cause a loss of performance. Even if you're subtly turning the wheel, even like 5 to 10 degrees, you're going to lose the back end. You're not going to lose the back end because you're using an FR car, for example, but it's going to be really, really difficult to get onto the power. So it's the beginning of the corner.
I still lost it into this corner with my setup on this car. It's still definitely possible.
Yeah, so as straight as you possibly can, and that's like the biggest advice that I can give you. And also one of the things is that the entry of the corner will prepare you for the exit. So I know a lot of people will say you can brake as late as possible, you know what, that's good. But here, it's actually better to brake a little bit earlier when you're at the, actually at the top of the hill, but brake in the straight line. But even if you do a subtle change with your wheel, a sudden change of direction, even if it's 5 to 10 degrees, you will most likely slide at the end. So it's very important to carry that speed in the straight line, and once again, get off the brakes here. That's the most important part. So you're actually getting up the hill in the straight line, you're braking in the straight line, and when you reach this point, it's very, very important to get off the brakes, because once again, we have a lot of that weight onto those front tires, and we don't want to put too much stress again onto those front tires. And that's why you just want to avoid that understeer. So here, lift off, coast for a little while, and then when you see the entry, you can actually see, well, it's actually the exit curve right there. This is where you're starting to accelerate, and this is how you're carrying all of that speed.
One question relating to how much one should carry the brakes into the corner, because sometimes what in my experience, when I get off the brakes like into the corner, the car tends to understeer, and I am fighting with the steering and I am losing time. But I don't know, you say like try to get off the brakes early, so if there is some sort of criteria to know how much brakes one should carry into the corners.
You can see he's only really just turned into the corner and he's released the brake, and this is a 180-degree corner. Okay, so you need to find references, so you can see he's released the brake before he got to this rock. So now you can use that as a personal reference. So look at his inputs here, okay? No braking, no throttle. He is just coasting. Remember we said when you release the brake, the steering wheel, you've got all of that grip up for rotation. Use it. Now look how much the car rotates before he gets on the throttle. This is the moment where he's released the brake and rotates the car. He didn't do anything else. He released brake and put a lot more steering input into the car until he eventually gets to the point where there, he's just got the throttle.
So my way is learning from the best. So what Luke said right there, I just always watch the replay first, and that's on Mondays, especially on Mondays. So I don't have a lot of time on my hands. So again, in 20 minutes, I can get a good lap. I just go, look at the best guy out there, I slow down the footage, I spend about 10-15 minutes analyzing that lap, and after I analyze each and every single corner into detail, then I go into the circuit. So I don't go onto the circuit and I don't think too much about what's going on. So I spend about 50% of my time learning and 50% of my time on the track. And if you got any more questions, please let us know down in the comments. And if you want to check out coaching offers, you might as well jump on my website. So it's going to be down in the description. Once again, thank you very much for watching. And until the next time, bye.